for those maybe who don't know Natcap, it's a really interesting sort of background, right? Founded by scientists from Oxford University.
That's right, yeah.
Can you maybe just give a little bit of background to the kind of founding and what Natcap, what's its raison d'etre?
Yeah, happy to. So about 7 years ago, we were founded from Oxford University. We were doing environmental research with companies, trying to help them understand their impacts and risks around nature, and found it easier to do that outside of the university than inside. So we founded Natcap. What we do now, we are a nature intelligence company. So essentially a service provider. We work with the largest corporates in the world, helping them to build their nature strategy. So what are their impacts on nature, largely in their supply chain? What are their risks? And ultimately, so what? What can they actually do about that? So partly through consultancy, but we also have a very big data platform. We bring together, scientific method with all the great data that is out there, and there is a lot of data, to help them evidence their actions.
And so to what extent, so obviously location is incredibly important, right? And I assume that there are certain hotspots where there is just the sort of confluence of both. There's a lot of business operating there, but there's a lot of significant risk. How do you advise companies to think about location or hotspots? Is it just about identifying those hotspots, or is it more to it?
Yeah, I mean, hotspotting is the first step. So hotspotting is a tool for CSOs to understand, where should I apply my limited budget? Where should I start? And nature is highly location specific. So it's a little bit more akin to climate physical risk than it is to climate impact. So you have to know where you're sourcing things from, where you're operating. And the way that we think about materiality is you have to understand the state of nature in that location. And actually, I was chatting a lot about nature earlier, and maybe worth defining what we mean by nature. Not just biodiversity and species, but it's water, as we've heard all of today.
Yep.
It's pollution, it's waste, it's the whole of E in ESG, as well as climate. But it is very location and context specific. So if you're operating in a watershed, as we were hearing from Wouter earlier, how water stressed that watershed is important. But not just how much water you're taking, but what is the context in which you're operating. And that's what makes it location specific. Pollinators only fly 1 or 2 kilometers from their nesting sites. So that actually makes it hyperlocal and often on your sites. So location is important, and that's the biggest challenge for a lot of companies, is actually just understanding where are we sourcing our products from, our commodities from. Legislation is helping with that. So if you happen to be caught by EUDR or CSDDD, then you'll probably be having the headache of having to understand where you're sourcing from, and that is a big job. But that data is very valuable, because from there you can then start to think about, okay, how am I going to engage with my suppliers? How are we going to make a more resilient supply chain?
Right, because it's not just about, on the one hand, is trying to identify risk, right? And risk to the business, but also risk to nature. But then do you help companies think about how do they go beyond just simply identifying risk, but actually to take positive pro-nature action?
Yeah, exactly. So you were saying hotspotting, that helps you understand, okay, across a very often diverse supply chain, where are the biggest impacts occurring? Where are the biggest risks? And then the question is, so what? So there are companies that are going beyond that sort of hotspotting work. And it's typically companies where the business case is really clear, which is interesting. And I think we've heard that a lot at this conference, which has been pleasing to me because I've been saying this for a while. But if you're a food and beverage company, your main ingredient is water. And so Coca-Cola, Suntory have been thinking about this for a long time, thinking about increasing the resilience of water supplies in the catchments where they operate. So that might look like investment in upstream ecosystems in wetlands. If you have cocoa in your supply chain, and we know we talked about this a lot, West Africa 4 times the price of cocoa. So you're thinking about the resilience of those supply chains. You'll already be engaging with your suppliers, thinking about tree planting, thinking about fair share of profits. Species is a good one. So if you're AstraZeneca, you're investing in the habitat of horseshoe crabs. I don't know if you know what horseshoe crabs are, but their blood is used in the production of vaccines. Really interesting, and it's a sort of non-destructive harvesting. So you want those horseshoe crabs to be around, and they're impacted by pollution. So all of these actions are around resilience. They're about securing your supply chain for the future. So it's interesting. There's a bit of a kind of carrot stick thing going on, but regulation is not the only driver.
So, and what have you seen in terms of demand for companies wanting Natcap services? Have you seen a real rise, I guess, in preparation for some of the regulation, but as you said, not just that? Can you maybe say a little bit about, maybe give some examples of companies that have come on now? I mean, you gave a few there, but a few additional ones around companies, because I imagine there's some at different stages of the journey, right? Those who have been doing this and thinking about this for a while versus those that are just getting started.
That's right. Yeah, there's big variation for nature. It's coming on later than climate. It's catching up a lot. But there are some companies that are just 6 months into their journey, and there are some that have been doing it for 20 years. We have seen a slowdown a little bit in Europe with the omnibus. So some companies are just waiting to see what the regulation is going to do. But I was at the CSO leaders session yesterday, and what was really reassuring there is that it sort of reflected what we've been seeing as well, which is CSOs are just cracking on because it makes good business sense. And so TNFD is being adopted. It's gaining momentum all the time. Interestingly, certain geographies are really picking it up. So it's very big in Japan and in the UK as well. And at the moment, ISSB and TNFD are in discussions to bring those two frameworks together. And so although the US political climate means that a lot of companies are being more quiet about what they're doing, it's not really slowing down. So a lot of companies are thinking about their TNFD report, bringing all their data together. We work across a range of industries. So I'm thinking about who I can actually talk about, but industries that have a large interaction with nature, and it's broad. So food and beverage, retail, extractives, minerals and mining, pharmaceuticals, for example. Yeah.
And in terms of the sort of data required to understand the impact on nature, it would seem that, with the sort of what we've seen around developments in sensors, AI, is the ability to capture data related to either impact on nature, the causes of it. Is that really, are we seeing a kind of revolution there, or has that become much easier to do?
Yeah, yes and no, I suppose. So we are a data company, and we think about bringing together data on both the state of nature, but also what companies are doing to help them build their strategy. There is a big change in what we can do in terms of sensing nature in real time. So really exciting, rise of eDNA, bioacoustics, real-time monitoring of water quality. That's really exciting. There's a lot that we can do with that kind of volume of data. But the thing that really interests me is more on the other side. It's about bringing the activities of businesses alongside that nature measurement. Otherwise, we risk measuring nature perfectly and it's, great precision, but still not getting to the so what. What should we actually do? But we know that nature is declining massively and rapidly. But it's the interaction with the impact driver and nature that really interests me. And there, yes, large data and computing can help a lot.
And how do you, what do you find is most, so for those in the audience, right, who are working in companies that are maybe not thinking about this, what would you say is most, do you have any advice for them around what's most effective at getting them to convince the senior leadership that they need to consider nature risk in addition to climate risk? Yeah,
because as we all know, CSOs have a really tough job and it's an advocacy role largely. And you sometimes only get one or two shots at really convincing your procurement team or your CFO that there is an issue there. So you need to bring not just hotspotting data, but real quality data with a business case to take an action. And so that would be my advice. And it does depend where you sit in the supply chain. So if you're more towards the producers, then you probably know your suppliers, having conversations with them, understanding what their practices are and driving them towards certification, more sustainable practices is going to be the way to go. If you're further up that supply chain, then it's a little bit more tricky, and maybe you're looking at efficiencies and reducing your resource use. But in all cases, my advice would be think about the business case. If you can quantify the ROI, then that is going to be very compelling and convincing. a shameless plug, but we have written a guide, a free guide for companies about how to make that business case, and you can sort of scan our QR code and download it. But I'm also doing a piece of work to kind of gather case studies where companies have shown a real business imperative. So if you do have an example that you would love to shout about, come and find me, because I think that's what we need to do. We need to be a little bit more vocal about the bottom line in the business case, because that's compelling.
And is there opportunity there too? Is there business opportunity there, not just sort of risk mitigation?
Yeah, absolutely. So we heard about IKEA earlier. They're a classic example of where actually efficiency through climate, but also nature, just meant that their cost centers were reduced. Bosch has been doing this for years as well through circular economy. And again, it's about efficiency. It's not necessarily about sustainability. I was speaking to Decathlon yesterday, and they too have been thinking about circular economy as well. So there's lots of examples of where there's, it's business opportunity as well as, for the pandas and the bees.
Mm. And so are you thinking ahead? I mean, I've been also very impressed and heartened by the sort of mood, the still optimistic mood within the audience, despite, the very visible turn away from these issues in the US. How are you feeling as you think about the future in terms of the kind of protection of nature risk? Because obviously, if you start to look at the sort of stats around biodiversity loss, it can be rather alarming. So are you kind of glass half full, glass half empty? What do you think we need to do to kind of accelerate, think to the future?
Depends what time of day it is.
Yeah.
No, I am positive. I think it's an inevitability. What we do see with nature is when you give it space to recover, it does come back. So there's a rewilding program in the UK. It's very similar to those in the Netherlands, where they allow sites for natural processes to take over a site. And it's remarkable how quickly biodiversity actually starts to return, and they become oases in a landscape. So that project is NEP, by the way, if you wanted to look it up. So I am positive, yeah, but I think we need to move a little bit quicker, and that requires people to lead, and that's why I'm interested in these case studies to show that it can be done, and it's good for business, but it's also good for nature. Yeah.
Now you mentioned we do a lot of work on oceans, the marine protected areas. What you see is that if you can actually protect the areas not just on paper but in reality, it actually does, it sort of replenishes the biodiversity in the areas surrounding the marine protected areas. But do you do much work in the oceans as well? Is there a gap there, or is that sort of happening as well? Yeah,
there is a gap. We do marine and we do ocean. There's a lot more that we could do in that space. And there's an interesting interaction with renewables as well. So you were talking about MPAs. Yes, you often see that species of fish and marine life really build up around areas of, for example, wind turbines, because you can't trawl in those areas. So it's reducing that impact. And when you take the impact driver away, then nature returns. But no, I think there's a big gap in marine. I don't think we talk enough about marine. I've been hearing more and more about it, which is fantastic. But yeah, I think it's something that's, if it's not seen and not measured, then we don't always realize the state that it's in.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. But Beccy, thank you so much. And clearly, I think the Natcap's doing some really interesting work. It's great to see that nature risk is rising up the sort of corporate agenda as well, and sort of merging with climate risk. And obviously, the data that you're providing is really helping that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Beccy.